Hello everyone and welcome to the midweek program at the Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake and I'm the education assistant here at the Arboretum, and today we are in the townhouse garden because we've got like a quarter inch of rain for the month of October, so everywhere in the garden looks really tired and really dry and really sad right now. But here in the townhouse garden, we've got this lovely little microclimate. We've got a lovely water feature. It's lush and vibrant and beautiful, which is the perfect setting because we've got a horticulture hour today. We've got a panel of horticulturists here. On the far side, we've got Tim Alderton, our research technician. Next to him is Mark Weathington, our director. And then right here next to me is Greg Paige, our director of horticulture. We are here to do an hour-long Q&A. All of you joining us live are welcome to drop your questions in the chat. We will go through your questions and get them answered by our panel of experts. And with the announcements out of the way, we can get things started with our horticulture hour for today. And as is tradition, Tim went around the garden and picked out some interesting botanical artifacts that, they're not interesting?
No, but they're just a couple of them.
Just a couple of botanical artifacts that he wanted to share with us. So Tim, if you would be so kind. Okay,
so this is kind of a cool Halloween-y type one. But this plant here is it has multiple names. I looked it up, but Proboscidea louisiana, I believe it's Latin. And it goes by so many different names, and you'll see why. The first one, which might be apparent, I don't know if we can see it in the camera or not, but this has the thing stuck to it all over. This is a cutting of it. This is aphid trap is one common name. And there are insects adhering to the sticky glandular hairs that are all over this plant when it's an active growth. It's an annual. It's apparently it's considered a weed in some places. We have it planted in the garden, just a few spots, and I get a couple of seedlings each year, so for us it has not been a problem. But some of its other names, and you'll see why, might be elephant plant, which, and going back to its name, Proboscidea refers to the trunk of the elephant, more or less, or the nose, or proboscis. So that's where one of the names come from. And then there's so many different ones here. I have to actually, I'm going to cheat because I can't remember them all. Then the other ones, which I think are more Halloween appropriate, is devil's claw. And this thing will just hang on you if you let it. It's a good distribution thing. Commons devil's claw, unicorn plant, Louisiana unicorn plant, purple flower devil's claw again. So those are, goat's head. Which I can see that too. Here's the horns. So yeah, for sure. It's like, so I just thought this was such an appropriate plant for today. And I was kind of harvesting a few of these. We sometimes use them for children's programming. They can be made into little crafts, but the seeds are quite large. I just learned that it had been in a different family that I learned it as, which was a Peduculariaceae, something, or Petulariaceae, okay, which is the sesame family, but they've put it into a new family now, Martinaceae.
Oh, really?
So they've split it out, but it made sense with the sesame part. So
for sure,
I could tell people something else that they knew what it was. But just a cool one there. Do you have any?
Well, I was going to say it has got a funky fragrance. It is.
It smells like an abandoned house to me.
but one that they went through and put like
mothballs.
Well, see, I get a little bit of sweet. I get like the somebody putting down like carpet freshener over the bad smell.
hide the bad smell. But that's what it is.
It is a weird fragrance.
It does weird things with your head.
Now, I'm actually not sure if it's the same species or a different one. The one that I first learned and grew, which looks pretty much exactly the same, except for it has a very light pink flower.
I've had variation on the coloring.
This is a really dark one.
This is nice one, which goes with the purple.
Yeah. So it is a cool plant.
Fun one for kids, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
And for crafts, because I got a whole bucket full of these things off of one plant. So,
no kidding.
Yeah.
Well, it's always right. It looks like something, you know, you look at the old Victorian folks who they would have their the Victorian naturalists would have their cabinet of curiosities, and they'd have like scarab, beetle shells and little pieces of coral or something like that. It looks like something they'd have in there to impress their other naturalist friends.
I remember seeing the seed when I was little in catalogs for these things.
Huh.
Yeah, and it was to grow them for the seed pod.
Yeah.
And they had different names for them, so it's like, because you could make that into a bird or something. It's like
You absolutely could.
You can see all kinds of little things out of that.
The sky's the limit with creativity on that one. So that's cool.
Yeah, so another one I have here, and this is one I went and got because Greg said someone...
I've had a dozen people the last week ask why are our snowdrops up. Well,
Okay.
There's different species, and some of them are supposed to bloom right now.
This is Reginae Olgae, the Queen Olga, which is one of the earliest ones. It's probably the earliest one. It's actually almost done flowering in the lath house. I mean, this was one of the last flowers on it that looked fresh. And then saw just yesterday that we have some, Galanthus elwesii, probably Montestictus flowering in the white garden already. And typically early to mid-November is not uncommon for those. So, but there was a clump already up. So yeah, it's not totally...
No,
to be unexpected right now to have Galanthus.
We've had some cool nights too that spurned that, but
Yeah. There's definitely something romantic about snowdrops peeping up through the literal snow, but snowdrops are just so wonderful. So it's great that there's ones that
and so rarely have snow here.
Yeah.
That too. That's another aspect of it, for sure. Okay, well, I think we are ready to jump into our questions. I'll start with a real question that a real guest asked me while I was out wandering the garden, and I didn't super have an answer to it. The question was, how do you tell the difference between Tetrapanax papyrifera and Fatsia japonica? The answer I gave was just kind of, the more you look at them, you just kind of can tell the difference. But I will pass these samples over to our horticulturists to see if they can elucidate a more definitive answer than that.
Well, for me, people look at plants different ways. For me, the easiest way is Fatsia has a glossy leaf surface and stems and everything, whereas Tetrapanax has little hairs on there.
And you don't want to breathe them in. They're nasty to breathe in. They'll make you cough.
Have a big patch and you're cutting them and things. I actually used to have my gardeners wear masks, and it'll stay there for a while.
Also, that thing will sucker on its roots. It has
somebody also said
spreading roots.
That one of these is invasive, and I'm assuming they were talking about
Tetrapanax.
Yeah. That's a definition that I think has gotten a little bit loose. For something to be invasive, it's like spreading on its own, like all over the place. This is a little more aggressive in the garden. This is more well-behaved. I would almost go so far as what you said. This can be a bit thuggish in the garden. It suckers, it spreads around. I think it should be thuggish just because of that tomentosa, that pubescence that comes off. But it's hard to beat it's hard to beat that great big
right in here.
That great big leaf.
Especially.
And they're both just coming into bud right now. They're both autumn flowering. The inflorescents are just pushing up on the Tetrapanax. Often the Tetrapanax will get frozen before it flowers, but sometimes the last few years we've had it.
Flower, we don't get fruit usually, but it usually dies back to the ground or close. Not every year anymore.
Steroidal giant's one that's a little bit better.
It suckers and it'll spread through things, and it can be a pain to dig out. I've dug out a bunch. There are one or two that are supposed to be non-suckering. Don't believe it. They will sucker. They're not. Some of those are not bad about suckering, like steroidal giant. If you plant it and you do absolutely no gardening around it, but if you go in there and you cut any of the roots around it, it's going to sucker.
Makes it mad.
I
do get fruit set on the Fatsias, though, and we do get seedlings of those. So
yeah, but like a lot of plants there's some plants that will form seed and the seed will grow, but the birds aren't moving them. So you get the seed right under them. And really, we look at plants that are escaping the garden as ones that are real potential problems.
For sure. And I did like all of those answers, but I'll tell you something, I don't like not knowing things. So I looked up the answer to this question, did a bit of research on my own. I can give you guys an 11th finger to tell the difference.
Well, I will also say one other thing with
Okay.
the difference is the Tetrapanix grows stalks that are up, and it'll suffer,
Sure.
and you can get bunches of them together, and it can look full. Fatsia is a shrub; it'll come up and have multiple stems, and
That's good.
and
much branch.
is, evergreen.
But are you ready for this?
Lay it on
So
us.
they're both lobed leaves, yes? So the Fatsia is just lobed, palmately lobed, and the Tetrapanax is also palmately lobed. However, on the Tetrapanax, the lobes themselves bifurcate. So you can see on this one, the vein here splits right there, whereas on Fatsia, none of the veins split. Each of the lobes is just entire and simple by itself.
Except
So-
for those bottom ones.
except for those bottom ones. Yeah, no, for sure. That's true.
Yeah.
I'm trying to come up with like going off of the 11th finger things. Like not everybody's 11th finger is sticking out all the time. So
Right.
there you go. But
You know, it's interesting being asked that, because I know you could look at a plant from 20 yards away and
Yeah.
you could say Tetrapanix, or you could
For
say
sure.
Fatsia.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first was a graduate assistant teaching, doing the woody plant ID, I would say, I can tell you it's a dogwood. I can tell you it's a dogwood without leaves on it from
Right.
25 yards away.
honestly,
But then you have to figure out, how do I tell other people
Yeah.
that I know this is a dogwood? and it takes some real looking at a plant, because so many of them, I know Tim, Greg, you can look at it and we just know.
Just have a sixth sense.
For sure.
But then
you can tell what it is by the way that it is.
right.
Definitely. Okay, so we are ready for our next question. Okay, actually, this is interesting. So Sue sent me a direct message asking me this question, and then Marilyn put in the public chat basically the same question. So here it is. I've heard the JCRA staff say many times that Daphne is hard to grow. I've had one happily growing under a large oak tree for about 7 years now. It suddenly wilted about 2 to 3 weeks ago. The entire bush has wilted, but not yet turned brown. Should I assume that it's a goner? And then to add a little bit of Marilyn's flavor to this, she thinks that the alternating long periods of too wet and too dry has done it in with Phytophthora root rot. And the leaves look all wilty this whole month, and she wants to know, is there anything you can do to save it?
Well, I'll say for who was it, Susan?
Yes.
Pride goes before the fall. And for both of them, no, you're not saving it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have one I need to pull out right over here. It had the same exact thing happen. It looked-
And it's interesting what Marilyn said, because just yesterday I had a gentleman in who had a rhododendron, a large leaf rhododendron that he had been growing for about 5 years, never had a problem. And he was showing me pictures of it, and it was wilted, and it was a goner, he wasn't going to come back from it. And I told him, you either have voles,
That's what went off
which
my
he was
head.
pretty certain he did not. I said, or possibly it is, we had a wet summer, which the rhododendron isn't going to like. Same thing with the Daphne. And it could have gotten a little bit of Phytophthora going that might have recovered from. But then we had this drought and, this dry period, which stressed it out more and allowed, the plants kind of going back and forth. It's not really liking either one of those too much. And it just becomes too much for it. Or it was just its time, because some of these plants don't always live for that long. in our
Daphnes don't
landscape.
live long typically, but yeah, they get Phytophthora so easily. I never had issues where I used to live in Raleigh. We had Daphne, and they never had issues with voles, and we had voles up everywhere. They're pretty toxic.
Yeah, the Daphne.
So I think that would be the Phytophthora, and that takes it out quickly.
And if you've had it for 7-8 years, great.
Honestly.
Get another one. It's an awesome plant. That's one of the beauties of Daphne is, you can plant another one almost really in the same spot, and it's not like you don't want to plant another rhododendron where your rhododendron died. You're often going to run into problems with that. But the Daphne, it'll do its thing for another 5 or 7 years, and then it'll die again. And
And it's
that's
good to know
okay.
that. It's good to know that on the front end, to expect that with Daphne you're going to have cultural problems, and for no apparent logical reason they may just go south and decide they're not.
Or you could luck out and have it for 15 to 20. I know
That's
people
true.
who have
And-
those. So
And
it's
if
like-
you say, why should I buy this plant if it's going to die? What I say is, People go into the garden centers, they're going in right now, and they are buying flats of pansies that are going to die. They are buying mums that they're going to put in the ground and then dig up, even though they're healthy, and throw them away in 3 weeks. This is a plant that is awesome. Evergreen, fragrant, and flowering during the winter, perfect shape. You never have to touch the thing. And if it lives for 5 years and is great, it is worth every cent you paid for it. You know, take your pansy money and put it towards another Daphne, and you'll be much better off.
And happier.
Absolutely. Well said, Mark. No kidding. Okay, let's move on to another question. This one came from Carol, our volunteer helper here with us today. She wants to know, what would we recommend if your neighbor has too much bamboo growing in their yard?
These are the hardest questions that we get from people is, my neighbor is doing this, or my neighbor has pruned this, or my neighbor has planted that. And right now in our turbulent world, in the midst of a very turbulent election, I'm preaching that we need to be nice and understanding to each other.
Thank you, Greg.
So maybe the first thing would be to go the education route.
Sure.
Say, hey, here's I work at this place called the JCRA Raulston Arboretum. I know a couple things about plants. Notice you have bamboo. Here's where you're going to end up with that. And you know, if it's coming into your yard, you have every right to yank it out. But education is the way to go, and about the only thing that I can think of.
If it's coming into your yard, those tender shoots, they eat those in Asia. So like, look up on the internet recipes for bamboo and get it's a blessing. You're given free food when the bamboo is creeping into your yard. Like, you can look at it as, oh, it's coming, it's this awful thing, but like, people plant them for a reason, and there's lots of uses for plants.
And so there's 2 types of running bamboo. Just like there's 2 types of people, you know, people who think there are 2 types of people and people who don't. One type of the running bamboo, it sends the rhizome out, that underground stem, and then it roots down and then comes up. The other kind comes out and goes up and then roots down. Now, the types which go out and come up and then go down, if you just harvest those fresh young stalks, you've killed that. It won't. That is done right there. The ones that root down first and then come up, they will continue to grow, and it's at that anchor end. So it helps to know that, because just and Phylostachys, the one that this is probably growing, Phylostachys aurea.
Could be, yeah.
Sure.
Is one that'll root down and grow up, which is why it can be such a problem and so hard to get rid of. But it also only puts out those rhizomes once a year.
Yep.
So you can go through and trench along the side of, along your yard line, which, I mean, it stinks for you that you have to do that every year. But if you do that at the right time, and I'm not sure if it's spring or fall with that one.
They come up, I would think, because they come up immediately in the spring.
Yeah. So fall. So if you do that, you can cut them and you can get rid of them. There are services, some places, of people who do that. There is one locally, and since we know you're here in the Raleigh area, what's the bamboo nursery?
They just went out of business.
Well,
is that the one we got the email about?
Yes, but they're
going to continue to
to work with bamboo, and they will do like yearly maintenance of bamboo, and they will thin it so it's prettier. They will keep it contained, and they have some products that can help with that.
I don't know.
I don't even know the mechanical of keeping the trench, which helps keep it at bay.
I was going to say, you just plan on making lots of bamboo steaks and keeping something productive out of it, like, as well as eat it.
Sure. Yeah. Arts and crafts. I went to an art camp when I was a kid where really all it was somebody planted bamboo on their property. They had way too much bamboo, and they're like, hey, what if we did an art camp where all we did was use bamboo? And yeah, we filled an entire week making arts and crafts out of bamboo. There's lots of stuff you could do with it.
I almost bought a house that had a pool that was that would have needed to have major rehab to actually be usable. and I will never own a pool. I've been a lifeguard. I'm not vacuuming my pool. Forget that. Barely want to vacuum my house. But I wanted to fill it in and plant bamboo in there because it was a nice thick concrete. It had the ledge.
Only a plant nerd would see it.
I was like, this is going to be so cool. I can do like a little maze through there in the center.
Honestly, my gosh.
Have a little fort in there for me.
That's too good of an idea, Mark.
The potential.
Honestly, wow. Okay.
I really want to.
The other thing you could pitch is diversity and say, hey, you've got this great yard, and that's going to completely take everything over. If you contain it or remove it, you can do other things. Those are the hand grenades that I would use.
Yeah, I actually know a great plantsman down in Georgia, somebody I worked with at the Atlanta Botanic Garden, who planted bamboo around his house in town, and the house is kind of still there, but he has basically abandoned it and is living at his farm down in South Georgia. I won't say his name.
I know this person too.
Yes.
I've seen this house.
This house has been swallowed by bamboo.
Literally.
And this is somebody who's
one of the best plantsmen that I know.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I would agree 100%.
That's amazing. Okay. Let's go to another question. I wanted to do one that came in on one of our videos, the fast fillers video. Greg, you showed off a Nandina cultivar that was sterile. There was a question if that sterile Nandina cultivar has a chance of reverting back to its invasive form.
I don't think so. I can't remember which one.
Was that Flirt?
It was some gold one.
You had a gold one.
Old one.
One of the,
one of the puckered leaf?
No, just the regular leaf ones. One of the ones that was developed so that it wouldn't fruit. I don't think the genetics are there for the plant to do that. And I'm not, the tetraploid diploid thing still is a little bit fuzzy in my addled horticultural brain. But I don't think there's a potential for that to happen. Famous last words.
Yeah, for sure.
Quoting the person that developed Bradford pear and said it was, never going to produce seed.
But even if it did revert and it did produce fruit, the fruits of Nandina are so unpalatable to birds that they're one of the last things they go to. So like if you've got it on your plant for months at a time, you're not seeing it, you're not cutting it off, you're not doing something about it, that's, I don't know. I feel like that's on you at that point.
I don't think those are the amount of work that has been done to get to that point of not producing fruit.
Yeah.
And it not being invasive, I don't think it's going to go back.
For sure.
I don't think so.
That's
my best educated guess.
Yeah, I would agree. And I'd say there's, living things are weird. There's always a possibility. And if that happens, cut that, the first year, cut either the flowers off or the fruit off, get rid of them. If it does it another year, rip it out. But, it would be an odd thing for that to happen.
Cool. Okay, next question. So Greg has just bought, and a different Greg, not you, Greg. I don't want to confuse you, I know. But Greg has just bought a Cycas X Titaluta and a Schefflera Devalii. And he wants to know if now's the time to plant them or if he should wait until spring, and he wants to know if they're considered tender tropicals.
Definitely the Schefflera can go in.
Yeah, the Schefflera should be fine. I don't know about the, I'm not a Cycas person.
So my opinion is if you have the ability to hold them over, I would hold them both over. Depending on your source for the Schefflera, there are hardier forms of Schefflera Devalii and less hardy forms.
That's true.
That said, I plant in the fall all the time. The cycad, that hybrid between Titungensis and Revoluta is incredibly hardy. We find that these hybrids, the Revoluta's marginal here. You put it in a protected spot. The Titungensis is quite hardy. And these hybrids that have that hardy side in there, we're finding are more hardy than the hardy parent in a lot of cases. The key with the cycad is drainage.
Yeah.
They will not tolerate wet feet at all. basically, with the exception of maybe some real weird ones, no cycad wants wet feet.
And that's a good case in point for maybe holding them till the spring, because if you do that, you've got a much longer growing season for them to get established from the pot into your garden, and a chance to keep an eye on them. So, it's listen to your heart on that one.
Yeah.
You can get extra growth out of them.
You can,
even through
but
the winter.
Something that you always say keeps coming back to me is, when you're in the garden, if you got time to do something, then that's time to do it. If you're a person that's going to be busy in the spring, do it now and keep an eye on it. Don't let it get too wet through the winter. But if you're worried about it, hold on to them. Plant in early spring, and you've got a full growing season for that to get established, build up a root system, and then it's off and running.
And I'll say, I've seen people grow cycads as bonsai trees in Japan, like 60-year-old specimens, because, hey, they love drainage. And when you are growing things in containers, you can give it as much drainage as possible. And you've got the versatility to bring it in and out. Get yourself a nice pot. You can get a pretty looking plant for sure. So that is always an option for you.
And I was going to say, I'm assuming based on these plants that they are relatively small plants. You don't have big, huge ones. Size makes a difference. The bigger they are, the more comfortable I'd be putting it out. But those are both relatively, they're hardy-ish plants. Now, in a pot, they've got less hardiness because the roots are up above ground. But with something like that, and I have done this with things I'm a little bit afraid to plant out in the winter. I just put them, they're right near my garage. I just sit them out. And then if it's going to get cold, I bring them in the garage for a week or 2 weeks.
Yep.
As long as it's staying above about, 38, 40 degrees, you're not going to have any problem even with them in a pot. You're probably fine down to the, 32 or even lower in a pot. But if you say 40 and you just put them in your garage for a few days and then you bring them back out, you don't have to try and grow them on a windowsill and worry about, the heat drying them out and how much do you water them and things like that.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. That's all good stuff. Okie dokie. Shira would like to know, when do I stop watering new evergreens planted in September?
Not this October.
No. Depends on the weather entirely. If we have I think this winter is forecast to be relatively dry.
No kidding.
You might have to water the entire winter.
For sure, because it's not about length of time necessarily. It's about water stress.
Yeah.
Like, is it getting enough water while it's getting established?
And that's always the tricky thing with broadleaf evergreens and conifers and other things, is they're not going to show that sign of stress immediately in the winter because they're sort of kind of dormant. And if it's dry, they still need water. They don't need as much because the days are shorter, the sun's not as intense, it's not going to be as warm. It's important to keep an eye on things all through the winter. And an easy way to do that is just, stick your fingers in the soil. If it's dry and it's newly planted, there's no forecast rain in the future, it's good to kind of give it a nice soaking drink. And the duration to the next time is going to be much longer than you would wait for the soil to dry out when the temperatures are higher. So it's good to keep an eye on things, especially conifers and broadleaf evergreens through the winter.
Yeah, 100%. I will say, if you're one of those people who feels like they have to water all the time or not water at all, you're better off not watering at all.
Tough love.
You want to, if you're going to water, like Greg said, deeply and infrequently over the winter.
Absolutely.
We're going to put that on a t-shirt.
Deeply and infrequently. Just like my parenting style. Just kidding. I don't
that
have
come
kids.
from?
So
Where did
anyway.
that come from?
Anyway, okay, let's go to another question. Okay, this is a question we got on a YouTube video, and I don't expect any of us to know the answer, but this is really a test of our creativity and our problem solving skills. Okay,
right,
so this came from the video that Chris Glenn did about container water gardens. So they had water plants on the mind. So she says, we have a large dam and want to put lotus or water lilies in there, and every time we try, they are quickly eaten by yabbies. I am in Australia and love your videos, but would love your advice on this. Now, so...
Did you do the research on this?
I did some research on this. Okay, so yabbies are crawdads. And now, Tim, I know you're from Pennsylvania. So
crayfish.
Yes, okay. So yabbies are basically crawdads. And they're coming in, and I guess... And they're omnivorous. So they're not necessarily, oh gosh, and they burrow. I know that. So they're not necessarily pulling them out to eat them, but they are like pulling them out. And so that's, how do we combat the yabbies from coming in and ripping out our lotuses?
Are these big?
They're kind of
So they're
big.
crawfish to me.
It's a crawdad. It's a crawdad. They're big and they're blue. They're bigger than our crawdads. They'll burrow like 2 meters into a dam.
Whoa.
And let's start with this. Crawdads this is the southern vernacular.
Uh-huh.
And what do you call them?
Crayfish.
Crayfish
Uh-huh.
is more of a northern, so they're the same. And what are they called in Australia?
Yabbies.
So we're talking about the same thing
The
here.
common
Although
yabby.
I was gonna say, my family's from New Orleans and we eat them.
There you go.
But these are in Australia, so they are most likely poisonous.
Okay.
Or they
They're-
sting and or try to kill you.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
So
But they're usually 4 to 8 inches long. They can get as long as 12 inches.
that's a lobster.
It's a lobster.
No kidding. Yeah.
Sounds
A
like the
freshwater
in the
lobster.
aquarium. That's what I was going to say. Aquarium things,
For
freshwater
sure.
lobster.
I'm kind of honored that people in Australia watch us. It might be people that you get people in Australia that you know. It might be people down there.
For sure.
That we've reached that broad international spectrum is kind of a cool thing.
So, gosh, so I know people who've had problems with koi,
Okay.
trying to plant in the ground with koi.
Yeah.
And some people have had success with putting either like
Mesh.
plastic or wire mesh
Okay.
over them that
Okay.
the plant can go through, but the koi can't pull them out.
Sure.
But this is a burrowing thing,
Yeah.
so I
I
don't
mean,
know.
I've seen baskets that you can put bulbs in to
Mhm.
plant to keep
Yeah.
chipmunks and other things. So something like that might be a way to go. And if they're 12 inches long, if it's a small kind of hardware cloth,
You
Yeah.
can't have too small. I hate to say it for the lily. the
no,
water lily
but
to go
small
through.
enough that there's all different gauges and sizes. Something that the yabbies aren't gonna get through to chew on something.
Yeah.
With what you're saying, I would put the soil in there in that
Basket.
cube, that basket, plant my plant in it,
Mhm.
put the top, wire the top
Mesh
of
the
that thing,
top.
the mesh in, and then I would just drop it right down. I wouldn't try and plant it or anything. I would just drop it down. It'll root in underneath if the yabbies don't kill it first.
And we
And
can
that may-
establish beforehand.
And that may help it because it'll be sitting up
Yeah.
above the ground if they're really moving on the ground.
Totally.
I'm glad we don't have yabbies here.
Well, they're pretty. Like people keep them in aquariums.
That's
like
what I was
that
going to say.
seems
It sounds
the way
like
to
the
do
blue lobsters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
for sure.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Harvest your yabbies.
Right.
To the aquarium
Sell them
industry.
to Americans for their
No, we don't
aquariums,
want 'em.
and
No
then
yabbies.
you have more money to buy more lotus and water
Yeah.
lilies.
That's
No
right.
yabbies.
Round up a bunch of ankle biters in your neighborhood, give them a rock melon, tell them where the yabbies are, and they'll get them out there for you. The best I could come up with this was try to encourage like predators maybe.
Yeah.
Herons and cranes
Yeah.
and that kind of thing will eat them. And I saw online you can
Raccoons.
build like structures that herons are attracted to build nests on. You get one of those, you get a family of herons there. I'd love to see you try to keep yabbies.
I hate to
Yeah,
say it
short
though,
little
are they trying to
yabbies.
keep fish as well in this pond?
probably.
The herons might not be that much of a, I mean, they might
Having
Yeah.
grown up on the
discouraged.
coast, I will say if it's close to their house, herons are big birds.
And they're
Yeah,
gonna make a
and
mess.
they make a big mess.
Yeah, they do.
And if they eat fish and stuff like that,
Uh-huh.
it is pungent.
It's pretty disgusting.
For sure. So it's a difficult
It's not
problem,
a little splotch. It's a.
but I hope
It's a
we've given you
whitewash.
some inspiration for ways to address it. Okay, thank you for indulging me on that. That was
No
not an
yabbies.
easy question, but
Hey, and
I'm glad.
I'm proud of all of us for not saying anything about throwing them on the Barbie,
No kidding.
which is apparently something that
They don't.
Aussies
Yeah.
don't like you to say.
Yeah, for sure. They don't say it. That's just something Americans say to Australians. Alrighty, let's see. So Liz says that she would like to plant some small shade trees on the south side of the house. With the changing weather patterns, what would be a good hardy tree that could withstand hot, humid sun of the Piedmont?
I'm going to go out on a limb and recommend something that's hardly recommended here and say any of the new cultivars of Cercis that are floating around out there.
Huh.
That's a good small tree.
Yeah,
and there's lots of really, really good ones.
for sure. And they got a lot of Texensis in them these days for heat tolerance. So
Yeah.
you could definitely-
Or if
can
you
lean
could-
in that direction.
If you could get some really big, like the one we, glabra, the large one we have off the parking lot.
Yeah.
I don't
Any
know
of
when it's going
the-
to have that though.
Any of the styrax are good.
Will they take the heat against the trunk though?
I had planted some evening light up close to buildings at my garden in Charlotte, and they
Good?
thrived
Okay.
there and did very well. And they were more of an upright growing one anyway. They didn't take up a lot of space.
Perodia, maybe? No, that might not.
Perodia can get kind of big, but there's some fastigiate ones now.
Well, and the
No kidding.
subaqualis seems to want to go.
Yes.
Wow, that thing is.
And it's gorgeous.
Yeah. One that you can't get very easily, but it's on my mind because I just happened to be, before I came up here, was writing a little something about it for our e-update that's going out in the next day or two, and that's Euonymus carnosus.
Okay.
Yeah.
When we think of Euonymus here, we think of the vining, ground covering, variegated Euonymus fortunii, or we think of
burning
the
bush.
very weedy Euonymus elatus, the burning bush, or perhaps Euonymus Manhattan or something like that. But there's a whole group of them that are trees. They're often called spindle trees. I assume maybe they made spindles using that wood. Maybe I'll find out before I give a tour next week.
There you go.
In Europe and Asia, they have these. And this Euonymus carnosus is a small tree. We have it out in our parking lot, blazing
fall color.
sun, stays clean, dark green leaves, and then fall color. And the fall color lasts October, sometimes to the end of December.
Yeah.
It lasts and lasts, starts off burgundy and gets really nice red. Not easy to find. We have had it at plant sales, and we've often, for our members, done it with the seed our seed list, and it isn't weedy. But even the other European ones like Oxyphilus and
that's
some of
the one I
those
was gonna
are
suggest.
Europaeus, these more tree-like ones. Hard to find though. So
Hard to find, but a really interesting and great tree, urban tree
A
too.
prunus. Maybe a prunus. There's this one, I can't think of its name. It's just down here that we got from the National Arboretum.
That's a good, yeah.
first lady.
No.
Tommy?
It's a species.
yeah.
It's right over here. I have had seedlings of it though, but it's a big one and it has a nice bark.
Glandulosa,
No.
It's. I can
Tonkin
see it from here, and I'm blanking on its name.
not
Right.
Cerula.
No,
Clean foliage all year. It's a really good one. I know the one.
Now I gotta go look at it.
it's right over here.
honestly.
The one that we recommend a lot and is easy to come by is Chinese fringe tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Mhm.
And actually our native fringe tree is growing in a parking lot across from Hunt Library here on campus, which I did not think it would perform well.
They might get 10, 12 feet tall though.
Yeah, they don't get,
don't
if
get
you're
as
looking for a
big.
small
Oh,
shade
shade
tree, I
tree.
wouldn't think of them really as a
Yeah.
shade tree.
There's some selections that have been made that are more
Upright.
Tokyo Tower. There's some native ones that have been selected for different growth habits too. I know Brian Upchurch did a bunch of work on those.
Mhm.
If they didn't suck, or I'd say pawpaw. But
No kidding. Actually, Elizabeth and I have been working on our winter symposium that's coming up in January, and we're going to have a gentleman from Oregon come out and give a talk on hardy fruit trees for Zone 8A, which we are now. So
Interesting.
you might want to sign up for our winter symposium and see what fun palette of fruiting trees might be a good choice for such a site. Because
I was with him
Yeah.
out at his nursery, and he kept trying to show me stuff after he had shown me this one cultivar of mulberry,
okay,
red mulberry.
sure.
I would not leave that plant. I was like the interns here if we have something edible, whether it's pizza or a plant. They
I don't know.
would've got
Mulberry scares me.
that. But
Yeah.
oh my God, they were so good. They were the most delicious fruit I've ever plucked off a tree. And we grow peaches here, at NC State. And I've
Sure.
had those right off the tree.
Thinking of something else would be, there's a Corylus over here. Is it Pargesia?
Fargesii, Corylus
It's
fargesii,
much more
right?
arboreal
Mhm.
than many of the other hazelnuts.
One of my favorite groups of plants are the hornbeams, Carpinus. We have our native ones. I find some of the other japonicas are a little bit better in full sun. Foliage stays cleaner, but I love those. They're not flat, not
Showy.
traditional showy flowering trees, but the foliage is just
And they're
so
pretty-
elegant.
Very tough trees. What about
Tough tree.
Australia?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Popcorn
Our native
beans.
Australia, and
For
there's,
sure.
there's some cultivars that have been selected with really nice fall color.
No kidding.
And the bark.
Yeah, that's a
it
native
has
tree
rough
that's like I never see that like
Mhm.
anywhere. That's definitely a
Highly
good one.
underutilized, but
Yeah.
there are. I know J. Frank Schmidt released a bunch of
Mhm.
several cultivars that are pretty good
Oh, nice.
performers.
Mm-hmm.
And our friend Mark Krautman has grown some as well.
Cool. Okay, let's do another question. Let's do another question from Greg. Same Greg as before, still not you, Greg. Greg, well, he's asking questions. Best way to protect newly planted Trachycarpus as well as shell ginger and Edgeworthia. And he wants to know if Olivia Indian hawthorn is cold hardy without protection. So maybe we can
Where's
talk.
he at?
That's a good question. Here, let's say here.
So
Let's-
what is he protecting them from?
That's what I want to
That's
know.
what I wanna know.
I assume the cold. I assume
I
he's
could
worried
see
about
if-
the cold. So how worried should we be about cold for our newly planted, maybe marginally hardy plants?
I mean, if he's in Minnesota, we're extremely worried.
Yeah, exactly.
If he's here, let's assume Raleigh, shell ginger.
That's the only one that might have an issue.
That's and assuming when he's saying that he's talking about Alpinia zarumbet,
Yeah.
that I really never had long term.
No, it might grow the first year and fizzle to a little piece the next year, and then it's gone.
Yeah, I would recommend growing that in a container
Yeah.
and bringing it inside if you want to grow that. Mulch it really well.
Yeah.
You can put a cage around it and pile leaves up. I mean, it'll die back to the ground. It probably won't rot like some other plants will. The other ones, unless we got
Edgeworthias.
Edgeworthia
It-
zone
Trachycarpus,
6B.
Yeah.
I mean, unless we have a super crazy winter, or it's a tiny plant to
If it's-
begin
if
with,
it's
and
one-
it just planted it, it might have an issue. But
I would
after a
say
year or
with the
two, they're fine.
Trachycarpus, if it has 2 palmate leaves, even if don't have long petioles,
Yeah.
unless we have a really unusual winter, it will be fine.
Yeah.
Okie dokie.
And what was that? All of them? What
Yeah,
else
Oh,
did- or
the Olivia.
uh,
Is
this
Olivia
is
right
no,
here?
this is
Rosalind?
Rosalind.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's that's hardy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All day. Okay, let's move on to a question from Liz. She wants to know when and how to transplant camellias.
Right now
Right now.
might be an okay time to think about it.
Absolutely.
That's when I would do it. That's when, going back to what we talked about earlier, the broadleaf evergreens, when you transplant them, they can dry out. So if it's going in a windy spot, especially, you can have problems with it. I don't know. Do they still recommend like wilt proof or something like that?
We did a bunch of research on that, and we ran across people that swore by it. So Mark's referring to an anti-desiccant. You coat the leaves with it, particularly broadleaf evergreens, and it'll protect them from getting winter injury. We did some stuff on boxwoods, and it was kind of a mixed bag of things. Here those really aren't problems that we have to worry about. Things typically are going to be okay.
Yeah, we don't have the ground freezing.
No.
That kind
Sure.
of thing.
No,
Not like the
and that's-
Midwest or further
And
north.
that's where it really would make a difference. The ground freezes solid. There's no way, the plant's not moving water effectively.
And you have dry winds.
And dry winds just kind of completely deplete the plants and add to that initial stress. But I would not tell anybody to use them here. I think you're going to run into more problems than help.
Yeah, I've
especially
never-
with, it warms up so quickly.
I've never used them myself.
Because it also keeps the leaves from transpiring, and when you get these warm days, you want that to happen.
No.
Cool. Alrighty. So, wait, did we cover transplant? How to transplant?
we
Or
didn't
just talk
actually.
This action.
Yes.
Here is, with people who have not had success before, I'll tell you the best way to do it, because what you don't want to do is really tear up the root system, is to go through, like Greg said, with a nice long shovel, if you can, not your regular curved shovel, but a longer
A sharp
shovel.
spade.
Yeah, sharp spade, and go through and cut around it all the way around, try and do all the way around, and then do that again outside of that and dig a trench. Dig a good sized trench around it. Because if you don't, what everybody does, they like, I'm going to cut all the roots with this. I'm going to cut all the roots, went all the way around. Now put the shovel under there. I'm going to pry it up. Oh gosh, there's still some roots there. You know, I'm cut a little bit more, and then you get frustrated and you pop it up. So if you dig that trench all the way around there, you can dig down deep, and then you can really you have space to take that shovel and go underneath it. So, you know, do as I say, not as I do, because I don't do that. But it is really effective way to do it.
You're creating a nice root ball.
Yeah. And if you could always burlap it, if that's how they do it, burlapping.
If you do that
method,
then you can put something under it, a tarp or something like that, and then a couple people can lift it up, which leads to the second thing, and perhaps the most important thing. You want to dig a good sized root ball depending on your plant. You are better off with a small root ball that you handle and move well than you are with a great big root ball that you wind up beating the heck out of getting it from point A to point B. Mm-hmm. So go smaller than large if you can't handle it. If you've got, you know, equipment and a couple burly folks to help you move it, and you're going to dig under it and cut under it and, you know, get burlap or a tarp or something under it, you can go bigger. But
and pre-dig your hole that you're going to put it in. Mm-hmm. That way you're taking it from one spot right to the other, and once you get it in the hole, kind of backfill with some soil so that if it does fall apart, it falls apart right there, and it's not going to, the root systems aren't going to go everywhere. If you want to, I think it's a good thing, water in that soil to eliminate air pockets, and then put some more soil in. It's a little bit messy to do that, but it helps that soil settle around the root system and keep you from tamping it and compacting for the new roots to grow into.
And if you're in a spot where you have actually really nice soil, and you dig it out, and as you're taking it out, all the soil, you know, the soil all falls away, then you take what Greg's talking about to an extreme. You bring your plant out, you have soil there so that when you set those roots with no soil in it, so that you're a little above, you know, the soil line is a little above where it was previously, up high. Put in back in some soil, and then soak it in, and then put in the more soil and soak it in. And that way, like Greg said, you know, we tend to be really gentle with roots because we tell people you want this airspace in there. Listen, the airspace is between the little tiny particles. It's not chunks of airspace around the roots. Yeah. And one problem people have when they're transplanting plants is, and it kind of breaks apart, is there's some bigger holes in there. And they gently put soil back on, they touch it around a little bit, they water it a little bit and go away. And plant dries out even though you're watering it because it has all these big holes around there. Get that, you want soil
to root contact
all the way around there, and you're better off trying to compacting too much than you are compacting not enough. I mean, kick over my water bottle. I get in there and stomp on the thing.
He does. I've seen it.
And I am not gentle with plants.
There's video evidence of that.
I'm testing
on our YouTube
them.
channel.
I'm evaluating them to make sure that they're a good tough plants.
There you go. Okie dokie. Vandy is bringing her hibiscus rosa sinensis El Capitolio in, and she wants to know how much to cut it back.
Depends how much she wants to cut it back. You can be pretty brutal.
Okay.
If you have to be on a hibiscus.
Depends on how much white fly she wants.
Yeah.
Cut it back harder if you want less white fly. Yeah, you can. I guess
it'll reflush out. And I know where hers is at. She has a decent amount of light too. So.
Yeah, the light was. I have, you know, if you have less light, you want to cut it back less so you have more foliage there.
Or actually, it doesn't need it through them. It'll go semi-dormant.
Yeah, I mean, I think it doesn't matter.
Hibiscus rosa sinensis is pretty resilient.
If you cut back really hard and it's not in really bright sun, don't water it too much.
Yeah. Sure, yeah.
She has a good sunroom.
Okay.
Yeah.
You don't know. It could be a different Vandy.
Honestly, yeah.
Who knows?
There's not too many of those.
This is Vandy from Australia.
Isn't it though? Okie dokie. I guess
Okay.
going back to our fun little discussion about bamboo, Marilyn wants to know, how deep would a concrete barrier have to be to contain running bamboo?
3 feet.
3 feet?
That is what I am always told.
Okay.
Um,
I don't think that's deep enough.
Do you
wait, that's not 3 feet.
That's 18 inches.
3 feet's a yardstick.
a yardstick? Okay.
There are products specifically designed for it that, concrete cracks over time. And if you're thinking about, digging trench and doing quickcrete like we do in gardens where you dump it in and maybe you get it wet or maybe you don't, let it set in place, that is probably not going to be strong enough to stop it. So you either want real cement mixed and poured in there,
Sure.
or there are products where it's thick some kind of plastic
Yeah,
type
I've seen
thing.
that used.
And where it's connected to another piece is overlaps pretty well and is riveted in all the way down there, no gaps in there. But anything is should be considered a temporary fix. Now it might be a 10-year temporary fix.
Yeah.
Or even longer. Our bamboo didn't escape the Japanese garden for
It's finally
many years,
gotten
but
into the lath house
It
underneath
sure
a stone path.
we're gonna dig that sucker out.
Yeah,
I think
crazy.
it's so cute when it pokes up in the lath house, but I'm not the one who has to dig it out. So
It's a survivor.
It is. Okie dokie. So Sue says she has a gardenia that died of root rot, and she wants to know if she can put a new gardenia in the same spot or not.
I think you're probably less of an issue putting the gardenia back in the spot where the one died because of something lasting in the soil. This is a gut thing.
Okay.
But you're putting a gardenia, you had a gardenia that was in a spot that led to root rot.
Might not be the best
Right,
for that
yeah.
spot.
Is that spot the best place for a gardenia?
Yeah, there might be other cultural things going on there
Yeah.
that keeps the soil too wet, or Phytophthora is everywhere in the environment, and cultural things kind of help keep it at bay. Healthy plants are gonna fight it a little bit better, but there it might be a heavy clay soil.
Or the rain stress that we had.
Right. It could be close
Excess,
to
not
a
enough.
drain where it's getting a lot of water. Those are things to consider. But I agree with Mark 100%.
Okie dokie. We are running awfully short on time.
Wow.
So I think we will do one more question, and I know there were a handful of questions that we didn't get to. I will put those on the list at the very top of the list for the questions we'll ask for the next Hort Hour we'll do at the end of January. But so this will be our last question.
You could lightning round us if you want.
I haven't read them all yet.
Okay.
I haven't vetted them. I'm not sure if that's a good idea.
Okay.
So we'll finish this with, okay, Melody says, my Ligularia dentata reniformis indoor plant has done very well until the last few months when it has had repeated scale issues. These were managed by rubbing alcohol, but now it is not thriving and it has few leaves. She wants to know if she can save it by repotting it in new soil.
Ligularia reniformis.
In my experience, if the problem is not caused by root boundedness, then repotting it's not gonna fix it. Like if the issue, if we know the issue is insect pressure, then repotting it's not necessarily the solution for that issue. You're certainly welcome to try. If it might also be root bound in addition to having been eaten up by scale, and if that's the case, then moving it into a new pot will let it breathe a little bit and it might just help it along. But if that's the only issue, I wouldn't say you can.
And I don't know how much
save
control
it.
you're going to get with rubbing alcohol either.
Right.
That's really not something I would put on a plant.
Honestly, and like scale, I personally pick scale off by hand because I grow bonsai trees and I have that kind of time. And
If
I don't
it's
know
a-
what the rubbing alcohol helps when you can just knock it off with your
Yeah, I mean,
finger.
because your plant's so small, I would tend to do that too. Or I would cut off almost every leaf and
let it refresh.
then pull off any that are down around the crown. I will say with the repotting, if it's been in the same pot for a long time, even if it doesn't need to go to a larger pot,
oh yeah,
potting soil breaks down
Reinvigorate.
over the time and
Sure
can
does.
get really
any organic
dense
matter.
and yeah.
Sterile.
causing a stress plant.
I don't think of Ligularia
I can't think.
dentata as
Okay, dentata. Okay, that is a house plant.
a house plant.
Yeah, that.
Never.
It's a new one on me too.
Yeah, that's normally a temperate one that
Huh.
you could grow that outside in zone 5, if not 4.
I would
Yeah, it
do
doesn't
a
like it
different
It doesn't like it
scale
here.
Also, I would use a hort oil or something.
Sure.
If
Yeah.
it's a true scale, what you're seeing are the adults, and there's eggs underneath there, and those eggs are going to hatch out, and you'll have the little crawlers that are moving for other places. That's the best time to treat for a scale. I would not use a rubbing alcohol.
I would say plant
And
it
that, if you
outside.
catch it with the crawlers that are out, take that sucker outside and
blast it.
blast it with
Yes.
water.
Just give it a bath. But yeah, where's she keeping it? Yeah.
Honestly. Okay. Well, that is all of the time that we have for today. So thank you, Tim and Mark and Greg, for joining us on this Hort Hour and having a wonderful Q&A session, answering all these horticulture questions.
Thank you for letting us know what a yabby is.
My pleasure. I love enriching the culture of this arboretum. And thank you everybody for joining us on the midweek program today. We will be back next week with a partially pre-recorded, partially live Mark Weathington showing us the best plants for a garden at night. So you will not want to miss that one. We will see you all next time. Y'all take care.